Hey, welcome to the podcast. Today we're joined by Jeff Sesol. Hi, Jeff.
Hey there, how are you doing, Colin? I'm excited to be on the show.
Really good. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for joining. So you're the founder of Pull the Chute, a company that helps leaders slow down, gain perspective, drive resilient growth. And today we're going to dive into crisis management, resilience coaching, and probably a number of other things as well. Really trying to help businesses thrive during uncertainty, looking at advisors, looking at a whole bunch of stuff. How's that sound?
It sounds great. Let's go at it.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff, Pull the Chute. I used to do some parachuting. I'm assuming Pull the Chute means pull the chute.
Correct. It's all about skydiving. So around my 40th birthday, I went skydiving. And as I tell people, you go 14,000 feet up in a plane, you tumble out, you're flying at
Yeah.
120 miles an hour. Everything's happening so fast. It's hard to breathe. One little move of your hands, you're spinning out of control. Everything's happening so fast, you can't see where you're at and you can't see where you're going. But at 5,500 feet, I pulled the chute. Something I could breathe again. I was in control, see where I was at and see where I wanted to go. And as I tell people, isn't that a lot like being in business? Sometimes we just need to pull the chute and just take a breath and feel in control and see where we're at and see where we want to go. And that's what we try to do with our clients. Try to meet with them once a week for at least an hour and get them to pull the chute and to work on their business instead of always being in their business.
Fantastic. Sounds awesome. Hey, look, I've done a lot of parachuting over the years and
Good.
a number of times, a lot of times. Yeah, I know exactly what it's like. But there's always that moment of impact. You have to consciously, you've done it. You really have to pull that thing. Yeah? The effect, that deceleration, that calming effect. It's not instant. Yeah, because you're like, is it gonna pull? Is it gonna pull? And then you feel like you're going upwards at 1,000 miles an hour.
The first time I went, that was the thing I was not ready for, was the air brakes going on.
That is incredible. So, I mean, look, there's some great analogy in this. Okay, fantastic. So, in terms of like, I guess, like the biggest things going on at the moment with your clients, what do you think? What's the theme? I kind of got an inkling. I maybe know a couple of them, but please.
I think a couple of things are going on with clients. One is, I think when you're in business for yourself, you kind of look at in the mirror and you say, what's my next step? What's my legacy going to be? I have a number of, let's say, mid-50 clients that are saying to themselves, so, what do I want to do with this business? Where do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And then how do I get there? Right. And so that's one of the big things that we spend a lot of time on is, first of all, what's the time frame? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 7 years? And then do you want to sell it? Do you want to hand it off to somebody? I mean, just there's all kinds of factors that go into that. And so they
Mm.
struggle with that. And then the other thing that most of my clients struggle with is the inability to get out of their own way, and that I need to have everything go through me versus let's delegate a little bit and just trust that you've trained your people properly so that they can get the job done.
Yeah, that's tough. That is tough. So do you work with a whole bunch of different types of startups or businesses, or is there a broad range, broad church?
Yeah, I'm across the board. Like I have 2 lawyers, I have a nonprofit, I have a painting company down in Atlanta. I have another coaching company up in Canada, 2 actually in Canada. I got one in the UK, again, more of a coaching kind of thing. But I've worked with telecom companies and I've worked with marketing companies. So there's really, and the other fun one was actually, and I didn't think I'd like it, but it was the medical. I worked with a dermatologist and just a doctor. And the funny thing there was that the doctors don't want to deal with all the office crap and they want to hire this office managers to do it. And so I basically ended up working with the office manager, taught them how to be a better leader within the office, how to deal with situations, how to deal with all the crap that goes on in the office. And the bad part is, and not that I'm picking on women at all, but most doctors' offices are mostly women. The nurses and the admin and all that, and so they get a little catty with each other at times. And so, how do you kind of calm those waters a little bit so that they can work together? So.
Okay. I mean, that's huge. I mean, but the commonality in there is there. So it's a process and optimization of that business to enable the entrepreneur, the founder, to then go off and do their thing, and making sure the back office is that the key to it.
Yeah. So, I do 2 factors. One is business coaching and the other is leadership coaching.
Mm.
And so when we go and we look at the business, like I have a restaurant here in town where I live, really aggressive, in a good way. 38-year-old woman owns this building, has a restaurant and a bar. She's quite the visionary, but really hates the whole back office stuff, right?
Yeah.
The revenue, expenses, all that stuff. So I'm coming in to help her do that. Well, then The other piece is that I help them, and this goes across the board, right? So the other thing is that I help them also be a better leader with her people. So she always had staff turnover, right? And so we kind of figured out what was causing that. And so we've changed the way that we are building the culture and kind of making it more of a community where we rely on the staff to actually do some of the work versus her having to do all the work.
Mm.
And it worked out amazingly because unfortunately, but then fortunately, her daughter got very sick. She has a 14-year-old daughter, got meningitis, had lesions on her brain. She was out for 6 weeks. Her staff was able to keep the restaurant bar going for 6 weeks without her ever being there.
Well, that's fantastic. Well,
That's just
a fantastic outcome. Yeah,
yeah, right. Yeah,
absolutely.
and the daughter, by the way, is fine now too. That's the
Yep,
good outcome. Most
yep.
of the businesses I work with, they just don't trust their people enough. My big message to them is let's train them better then. Let's spend time.
Why is that though? Why don't they trust them? Is there something going on before that's led to that distrust? Is there some kind of burning that's happened in the past? Or is it just they haven't given them the opportunity to show that they can lead, that the staff can cope with it because they're on them all the time?
I think ultimately they just don't get the opportunity. Most entrepreneurs, business owners, small business owners, or medium business owners, they think that they started the business. It's their responsibility. They need to touch every aspect of the business, which we talked about before. They can't get out of their own way, right? And I think that that is one of the where the distrust comes from. But the biggest problem is that it's the vicious circle where, hey, we need to train them better so they can do the job, but I don't have time to train them better. But if I don't take the time to train them better, then they're never going to learn how to do the job better, right? So we have this vicious
Yeah,
circle.
yeah.
And so I kind of come in there and I say, look, we have to box out time. I have one of the lawyers that does estate planning, and he just brought on this new girl, and she's doing great. She's just wonderful, but she's taking a little longer to learn. And I identified that he wasn't spending time with her on a weekly basis to train her well enough. He kept saying, "Well, I got busy here and I got busy there." You've got to block that off. It's an hour a week. That's all I'm asking you to do, at least right now, you know, and spend time with her. And boy, what a difference. All of a sudden, she's flipped that corner. She caught on right away then and just made a huge difference. But, and from a coaching standpoint, that's one of the things I really push with our
Mm,
with our clients is, look, you've got to spend time with your people. The
abs-
Pull the Chute tagline is grow your people, grow your company. So if
mm,
you can grow your people, both educationally on the business and leadership wise, then they're going to actually help you run the company and they're going to find better ways to do things. I always tell my clients, I say, look, ask them what they need to do their job better.
yeah,
As long
go
as
do
it's
it.
within reason, give it to them because then
Go
they
do it.
own it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, look, I've just written down ownership, culture, leadership, and three massively powerful words. Certainly after I left Microsoft, I was looking for people in my businesses to own stuff. Just own it. I don't care. And I said to a new starter, just what day is it today? It's Tuesday. Well, there you go. Just yesterday, a new starter said, I don't care what you do, just if you screw up, it's totally fine. Let's just not make the same mistake twice, but own it. Let's
Yeah.
own it, build it, and lead that function. And that's what I've been trying to find, in this last 10 years, outside of Microsoft. Or I was very, very fortunate in that environment where culture and leadership to a point were really, really strong. So it's great that you're trying to push that through, all of your clients. I love that. I love that. How are you helping them with the R word, the resilience word? Because there's some crazy stuff going on that I'm sure is affecting a great many of the clients.
Yeah. Resilience is about the employees to a certain degree, right? Back after COVID and the great resignation, which kind of is still going on, to be honest, people were leaving 4 million people a month were changing jobs a month. You know what the
Yeah.
reason for that was? 79% of them felt unappreciated. Only 12% left for more money.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a huge stat, right?
Um,
And so when you're building in resilience within your company, right? How do
mm,
people manage? They got to feel good about what they're doing. And then the
mm,
resilience is going to occur, right? So they're going to handle situations. When things go wrong, they're going to be resilient and go, hey, we can solve this because they know they're a team. They're doing it together. They feel
yeah.
appreciated. They have a voice. They can say what they think and not feel like they're going to be put on the spot and look like the idiot. How many times have you been to a meeting where someone says, we walk out of it and they go, yeah, I don't know. That was kind of, I should have said we should have done this. And you go, well, why didn't you? He goes, well, I wasn't going to.
But if you don't have that empowerment,
Right.
or if you've got leadership that is going to jump on you, then how are you ever going to develop as an individual? So that's tough. That's really, really tough. Interesting.
Yes.
Really interesting. So in terms of so we've got resilience, we've got culture, we've got leadership, we've got ownership. They're very human traits, right? What about
And
AI?
I think the sad part is We just don't lean on them enough in the right way. So, we're in an environment where we have 4 generations in the workforce. The baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zers,
Yeah.
right? And over those 4 generations, technology has changed exponentially. And so the way that we communicate has changed exponentially. And one of the struggles that we run into is leadership hasn't changed in the way that it needs to change in order to create these environments where 4 generations can get along and can understand each other and can communicate. And so that's one of the biggest, I think, issues overall is that, we've got to spend time training our younger people how to communicate better. For example, a Gen Zer would much rather text you than pick up the phone and call you or talk to you face to face. With baby boomers, they're all about face to face, right? And Gen Xers are pick up the phone. Millennials are a combination of texting, pick up the phone, and email. They were big on email. Like they would do books on emails, right? And so one of the things I always tell them is, look, if it's more than 2 paragraphs, pick up the phone, have a conversation. I mean, they're going to analyze every piece of what you say in an email, and they can't
I
hear.
need to deliver. I need to deliver a message on this subject. Unfortunately, to one of, he's turning rapidly into a business partner. He leaves me 3.5 minute voice notes. I said to him, Matthew, if you're listening, I apologize. There we go. I have to book out 30 minutes to just listen to your 3.5 minute voice note. If I was a lawyer, I'd be billing you.
I know, right?
So
Yep.
it's interesting though, the way everyone communicates, of course, is different.
Yeah.
But then, trying to make head nor tail of that and then fit that into a busy day. Certainly as a founder, okay, I've got a Gen Z, a Gen X, a Gen Y, I've got a baby boomer, I've got a Gen ABC, I've got everything in between. And everyone wants to communicate with me differently. And I'm like, well, actually, how do I not then put my imprint on, no, I need to communicate like this because that's the most efficient way of my time. And
Right.
what, then everyone else has to fit into that?
Yeah.
To an extent, maybe.
Well, and I think it's a little give and take, right? So you learn how the Gen Zers like to communicate, but it's on the Gen Zers to learn how to communicate better with the Gen Xers and the baby boomers, right? And so I think it's a little bit of a two-way street, and that's what we really need to teach them is that it just can't be always your way.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that the Gen Zers and the millennials are really changing the way the workforce or the work culture
Mm.
behaves. When we were, I'm a baby boomer, so when we went through a job, I mean, I started my corporate career, and I worked for Harris Bank in Chicago. And basically, it was you kept your head down, you did your job, you showed up on time, and you got a paycheck. They really didn't care if you had thoughts and ideas because they always knew better. Matter of fact, I was told one time, "I don't pay you to think. I pay you just to do this job. That's what you're supposed to be doing." Now, fortunately for me at the bank, I had an amazing boss, Wendy Bailey, who was my mentor, and she saw something in me and we ended up working together for 12 years there. And I taught myself how to program and we automated this entire department that we worked in. And, back in the 80s and early 90s, right? And so that was unheard of. A, she was a woman, taking control and being a leader, and B, that ability to kind of say, "Hey, there's something else going on here. We need to look at this and see how we can make a difference."
Fantastic.
You don't get that anymore. I mean, that's the problem, right? So that's what we have to teach the people is that we have to communicate properly. We have to look for certain aspects in our people. Well, the millennials and the Gen Zers, they won't tolerate that. It's like they want to know why. And I call it the why and because. They want to know why they're doing something because what's the outcome supposed to be? How many times have you heard someone say, "I don't know why I'm doing this. It's so stupid." Just give them the why and the because. And all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great."
yeah, or preferably give them the strategy. Build it
Exactly.
into their part of the business. Say, "Right, you own this part of the business. Go this you own the strategy. You tell me your plan. Give me
Yeah.
the 3 things you're gonna focus on today. Give me the signal. Forget all the noise. Give me the 3 things that are gonna, move the needle for you." I mean, personally, I find that works a treat. And again, just going back to personal experience, got a guy, he started this time last year as a graphic designer. He's now an AI and automation expert.
Wow.
He did all these images and stuff. He did all these images. He's an
Oh,
app
man.
gun, all of our design, all of our logos, everything. He could do it in his sleep, but he wasn't stretched. And I'm like, I've got this concept, I've got this vision of what I want to do. And we just sat down and went, yeah, we can do that. And we have absolutely. It's one of the best, one of the best examples for me,
Yeah.
of just seeing someone with attitude and aptitude, being smart, but also have the dedication. He's going to do really, really well. So, like I'd love to hear like any stories that you've got where you've found a founder, found a founder, found a founder, and you're part of their journey and you've taken them from here, and now all of a sudden you've dropped them off here, and you think, "I did as much as I could on it."
Yeah, we did that with a marketing PR firm in the telecom industry. She'd been in business for 10 years, doing 1.6 million. And this, to me, this is a very interesting story because the turnaround came from changing the culture and the perception a little bit. She had like 18 people working for her and she had, no, she had 15 people working for her and she had 22 accounts. So five of those people were directors. And so the first time I met with them, I said, tell me two personal things about every one of your accounts. They couldn't do it. Right. So her retention rate was 50%. So for every new clients she'd hire, she'd lose one. That's because there was no personal relationship going on. Literally,
Yeah,
her contractors would be, they'd start the meeting, be like, hey, Colin, glad you're here today. Okay, here's what's going on. Boom, 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 boom. Versus, hey, Colin, how was your weekend? How are things going? Like you and I did when we first got out. We talked about the temperature in Chicago, how hot it is,
yeah,
things
exactly.
like that, right? Those are personal things. And so I gave them an assignment. I said, you must find out two things about every one of your clients. And they're like, what? And I go, I don't care. Find out what they did on the weekend. Find out if they have kids. Find out if they're married. Whatever. I want you to build a relationship. Well, the retention rate went from 50% to 93%. No one ever left
Of course,
because all of a sudden we had a relationship. And here's the other cool thing. Maybe you make a mistake, they're less likely to leave you because they have a relationship, right?
the
Yep.
personal touch.
Yep.
Exactly.
We goofed, like you said, own it, right? We
Yeah.
goofed. Here's what
Yeah.
we put in place so this never happens again. By the way, because of that, we want to give you a couple extra hours of work over here.
No, it's
Fortunately.
super powerful. And,
Yeah.
I view that personally, through sales career, through business, through all sorts. You got to get to know people. I mean, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, uh, what's the point of anything unless you're really interacting with someone? And well, for me anyway, I
Yeah.
get buzzed up meeting people. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, let's real quick. We drove them to 6.4 million, by the way, just by making some of those small changes.
amazing. And
Yeah.
they have to work less hard on the front end to acquire new customers, less
Yeah.
marketing, less conversion, less stress. All of a sudden you can upsell and cross sell. Hey, I do a lot of work, as you know, with new and aspiring advisors or people looking to build their fledgling advisory
Mhm.
practice, maybe like Pull the Chute, maybe like Series A. Any advice from the future?
I think the biggest thing that I've worked through is that, if you're starting some kind of coaching firm or advisory or things like that, again, I'm going to use the pull the sheep thing. Pause, see where they want to go. What happens, I think, a lot of times from a coaching standpoint is that we want to give advice or tell them what to do versus let them figure out where they want to go and then let them figure out what they need to do to get there. So I think we need to guide a lot more, ask questions, find out where they want to go, get them to, when I talk to people, I always say, look, don't respond emotionally. Take a step back, take a breath,
Mm,
ask yourself, ultimately, where do I want this to be? Where do I want it
yeah,
to go? And then figure out the best way to get there.
exactly. Yeah,
Try not to make it emotionally a decision, but a
mm,
logical decision. It's going to help you. It's going to help your business. It's going to help your employees. It's going to help your clients.
exactly.
But that's probably one of the biggest things I notice with people that are being coaches is they have a tendency not to do that, not to coach their clients that way. And some of them are, they go through these certifications and, it's step one, step two, step three, or A, B, C, D, right? I mean, sometimes you don't need the B and C. Sometimes you just go right from A to D. And so keep that in mind as well, is that it's not, everyone's different. And so it's not, you can't just plug them in and say, this is the next step we're going to do. You have to kind of understand where the situations are. And maybe you start them at step D. Maybe they're beyond A, B, and C. I don't know. But, I've had a couple like that where they're just a little bit different. I think for the most part, when we're coaching people, we're more life coaches than business coaches at times because
Yeah,
we're all their struggles.
absolutely. Certainly for some of the startups that I work with, I've been close to them for a few years, and yeah, yeah, some it's definitely a bit of life coaching in there. Yeah, that absolutely. You know who you are, if you're listening. So, okay, all right. So some great themes there. And we talked about, like, as I said, leadership, culture, very much human things. But we've got this big thing coming up that's going to test coming up. It's already here. It's on top of us. This wave of AI. It's already here. How are your clients reacting to that? What are you telling them? How are they going to cope with it?
I think there's a couple different things. Depends on what type of client and whether or not they can take advantage of it for themselves. The majority of my clients are more service oriented, so they're people oriented. They're in face to face with a lot of their clients. When it comes to the couple that are not, we're talking through the best way to leverage AI to help them grow the company. I saw a thing that said, most baby boomers are using AI like it's Google, just asking questions versus getting into entire situations and walking them through it. And, I have an
Mm.
AI assistant, I call her Emily, and she knows
Yeah.
everything about me, all of my books. I have 2 books out, all of
Mm.
my blogs. She checks the podcast. And so
Mhm.
all I have to do is say, Emily, based on what you know about Pull the Chute, do this, give me that, right? So I've spent the last 6 months teaching her all these things. And the cool part for me is that it's in my voice.
Right?
Well, I mean, it's not one of these things where I go, no, I'd never say it that way.
No.
No, it is totally in my voice, right? So if I wanted to do, like I'm doing a workshop and I asked her to help me kind of outline the workshop based on what you know. And she outlined it. I'm like, this is like 90% everything I would do and everything I would say the way I would say it,
Kind of scary. Very, very exciting. We're similar-ish kind of generation. I mean, I remember gathering around the Commodore 64, trying, teach you how to, play stuff, programming Space Invaders and
Yep.
Snake and whatnot.
That's how I learned to program was the Commodore
Right?
64.
What was it really? Out of memory error. There we go. The best audio chip, groundbreaking. Anyway, um, what we've seen and what we've lived through, and all these advancements is, in my opinion, nothing compared to what's coming.
I know.
Right?
Again,
So,
this alpha
y-
is going to be the AI generation. So it's scary.
yeah, exactly. Generation Alpha. Right. Okay. Yeah. Wow. So then, if we put that in the context of, yeah, okay, right. So we've got this massive, massive shift. What does that mean then for resilience in a human? I said on a previous podcast, that, someone had asked me, what should I say to my teenagers about what to really focus in on? And I said, just be human. Because if we're kind of outsourcing everything else, that's all we've got left, right?
You hit that nail right on the head because that's, my biggest and scariest thing is like my grandkids,
Right.
right? And this whole AI thing. And, if we forget how to think for ourselves, how are we going to function,
Mm.
right? If it's like, well, I don't need to learn that. I'll just go to AI and let them tell me how to do it. Well, then we've forgot how to think for ourselves. And so we need to not lose that. We need to make sure that we are constantly challenging ourselves to not leverage AI, but to kind of come up with some thoughts, some ideas. Now you can use AI to kind of fine tune it if you want, but challenge yourself to literally come up with solutions first, and then kind of go from there. Because I mean, AI is just so incredibly fast and just it's just amazing to me. Scares me a little bit too. We've all seen the Terminator movie, right? So we don't need self awareness at some point, right?
Exactly.
But that's I mean, I think we cannot lose the human interaction and the human personalities and the human thought process and all that within these next generations because that's
Mm.
going to change everything for our kids.
Absolutely. It's a real pull the shoot perspective moment, right?
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
There you go.
There you
Excellent.
go.
Okay. Okay. Um, if we flip back to culture within organizations, it's something that we're spending a lot of time with big business on, looking at, ironically, AI and how that can help, and the different platforms that we have that can run these kind of programs. What's the biggest blocker you see in maybe some of the larger organizations, from this cultural standpoint? I'm not looking at you, but I can see you smirking already. You've already got the answer.
Yeah. Well, what I find when I work with bigger companies is their lack of leadership development. So
Right.
the biggest mistake corporations make is, and you're killing it as a sales guy, we're going to put you in charge of all the salespeople,
Oh,
and don't teach them how to be a leader for those people. And
don't
then
do it. Yeah.
they wither on the vine, right? So again, another stat: 82% of all the companies in the world know that they need leadership development. Only 5% are doing it. And so, and of course, their response is, "Well, we just don't have time." And my response is, "How could you not?
How could you not? Exactly.
Could you not?" Right? So
Yeah.
here's the other great things. If the other stat, and this is, I think, believe a Forbes stat, so don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty confident it is that if you for every dollar you spend on leadership development, the ROI is 5.7 on an average. So you get $5.7 back for every dollar you spend on leadership development. Well, why is that? Well, because a lot of different things start to happen. When people say this is my company too, now all of a sudden they're your eyes and ears. So when
Mm.
things aren't going right, they're going to say something versus, hey, let's use this example, Challenger. When the Challenger blew up many years ago, right? The lower people knew there was a problem, but they had no way to communicate that in a way to the upper people. So that the upper management were like, no, we're good to go. And there was people in the lower echelon that were like, no, 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 we got a problem here. But there was no communication between those two in a way that said, hey, we shouldn't do this. We
Wow.
have a problem. And they knew they had a problem. Right. And so we need to kind of continually work with our people, teach them how to be better leaders. And here's the cool part: leadership doesn't mean that you're a leader to people. It could mean that you're a leader within peers, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, you and I are working together, we're peers. You're struggling through something, and I got a little bit of time, and I can say, hey, Colin, how are things going? You're like, I'm struggling with this. And you're like, hey, let me help you figure out a couple of things. Let's talk through it. That's leadership peer to peer, right? Because now I'm helping you instead of just letting you kind of do your job. And those are things that help companies grow. So when we have a good, solid team, a solid foundation of people that support each other, that look out for each other, that appreciate each other, that show empathy for each other, all those words, right? Emotional intelligence, that's really going to make these companies so much better. And so what we need to do with these bigger corporations is get them to stop worrying about the almighty dollar in all cases and realize that if they would take a step back, develop leaders. And maybe it starts at the very top. I don't know what their cultural leadership is like, but in many cases, it's the middle management that we like to come into, teach
Yeah.
them how to be leaders so that they are the next generation moving up. And so that when they move up, they're following the process of what the company would like as leaders. That's an important factor. And so that's one of the big things that we're really pushing out there and that we're passionate about when I say that, because, I Pull the Chute, we're an international company. And we're so passionate about just getting these bigger corporations to say, hey, look, pull the chute, take a pause. Let's see where your struggles are. And 9 times out of 10, where the struggles are, it's because of a lack of leadership. And so if we could teach them how to be leaders, and that's all building things like trust and understanding your why and how to deal with crisis management. We talked a little bit about earlier, right?
All the
All of that, right? Those are things where, again, the goal is that everyone probably has heard how to do it or knows how to do it. The problem is they're influenced by their family, first of all, as they were growing up, by previous employers, by people around them, by their friends. And so the reality is we almost have to do a muscle memory change, right? So when we teach people, we say, look, I need 6 months. And we've proven this time and time again. I had 2 people that wanted to only do 3 months. Nothing happened in change.
no,
Everybody that we do 6 months minimum sees change and sees,
yeah.
we get these phone calls that says, hey, I know we talked about this. I just want to tell you, here's what happened. And I actually paused myself and said, wait, Jeff and I have been talking about this. This is how we should go about it. And it solved the problem. But it's called muscle memory. And we just have to
Love
engage
it.
the way they think about things.
So Jeff, when culture goes off track in the organization, it kind of something happened in an organization I was in where there was all kinds of shenanigans at the very, very, very top, and everyone knew about it. It was, let's call it the Coldplay moment,
Yeah.
yeah, from the weekend. Now, when something like that happens, the ripple effect on culture through, I mean, let's call it out, the company in question and the people in question there, obviously there's something not quite right there. The ripple effect through the organization must be huge, right?
Right. Well, I mean, so you were Microsoft, right? You were at Microsoft? Yeah. So
That's
it was a cutthroat. I mean, I know a little bit about that one. It was a cutthroat environment for a while. And then you brought in Santi, if you remember the CEO's name, right? And he came in and just changed the culture and said, look, we're going to learn how to work together as individuals and as teams. This is not, I'm better than you. This is not cutthroat. This is not, hey, look what I did, but look what we did together. And he came in and really changed that culture in a way that was so impressive. And I think that's what, when corporations go off the rails, we like to go in and kind of interview the C-level and the C-suite and say, okay, where do you guys see the struggles? And here's the interesting part. I would say probably 70 to 75% of the time, what they see as the problem is not the problem.
yeah, true.
And so once we identify where the problem is, then they kind of go, oh,
That's the problem.
yeah. And so and usually it's how they're managing their people, how
Absolutely.
they're treating their people. I had a manufacturing company one time where he was continually turning people over, and I had to work with him a little bit. But his struggle is that he would go along, be fine, be fine, be fine, and then all of a sudden he'd kind of go off the rail. I was just like, wait, what are you doing? Right. And so it took me a while for him to see what he was doing and that he was the problem. And so, that's a hard thing sometimes.
just to comment on the Microsoft thing, when culture, for certainly my experience, was at its best, it was almost like a tea and biscuits company, and it was kind of funny. But then the share price was also at its lowest, and then when a certain guy came in, we could probably mention him. His name was Kevin Turner. He came in cowboy boots and smashed everything around operationally. Really, really, really did a number on the whole business. And you can see the share price all of a sudden started to take off. Culturally, it went exactly the opposite direction. All of a sudden, everyone's turning around thinking, "Where are my tea and biscuits? Huh? What do you mean I'm not allowed? My fizzy water fountain, my personal fizzy water fountain, and all the bubble that everyone was in. All of a sudden that started to be deconstructed a little bit. People didn't like that, but then the share price kept going and going and going and going and going and then going and going. And all of a sudden, a lot of people made a lot of money, and the culture kind of caught back up with that. And it's like, this is a serious place now. So anyway, that's just an observation. Hey, what's next for Pull the Chute in 2025? What's for the rest of the year? What you doing? What you busy on?
Yeah, we got a lot of things. So my second book is coming out. It's called The New Leadership Landscape: Redefining True Leadership. I'm hoping that's coming out very soon. We're just finalizing a couple of things. So maybe by August or September, that'll be coming out. We're going to hit our 200th episode on our podcast. We're pretty excited about that. And we've had some amazing guests that have been on there, and just some really good insight that people see, and it's all over the place. We have from corporations to coaches to marketing people and stuff like that. So we really try to cover the gambit and help people to kind of understand, some of the things that are going on in businesses. And ultimately, I think the understanding is that, a lot of times business owners think they're the only ones going through it. And so one of the things that we like to do is showcase that, look, you're not the only one going through this. This is just
Yeah,
part of the process.
exactly.
So that's going on. And then I think one of the big things that we're trying to do too is really grow internationally. We have an office in London, and we're excited about that. And then we're really trying to get some outreach going there, and kind of build on that. But ultimately, I want to turn this by the end of 2026. What I'd love to be able to do is be more of um, the voice, if you will, of the passion. Because I started this because of my passion to help people grow and be the best they could be. And so, if I can get it to a place where I have a number of coaches, and right now we have 6 coaches, where if I can get them to be fully engaged with, clients, and then grow from there worldwide and internationally, I'd love to do more workshops. I'd love to do more weekend retreats, things like that for CEO level people, have them come in and really, do a deep dive into what it means to be a leader, right? And I think people have a misnomer, like, what does it really mean to be a leader? And to me, leader or being a leader is not pushing people, but turning your head and seeing them follow you. It's being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with people and help them through situations. It's showing them how much you appreciate them. It's when things go wrong, you take the blame. When things go right, you give the praise. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the biggest thing I like to teach people is that leadership is not about you. If you make it about you, then you're not being a leader right from the get-go. Last year, I taught a group of 8th graders about leadership. There was at a summer camp, and it was very rewarding for me, only because I did it on a Monday morning. And one of the cool things that we did was I blindfolded the kids, and we had a little obstacle course, and it was silly things. It was like, a 2x4 you had to walk on. And so you had to pick something up and drop it in a bucket, and you had to jump up on a pedestal, like a 6-inch pedestal, and jump across what was a blue tarp that looked like a river and things like that. Well, the reason I tell you all that is because they had a partner that was telling them they were blindfolded, how to turn, where to go to do all this stuff and what to do, right, as the leader. But ultimately, what we did was we had all the other kids standing around them screaming. When the
Ah,
person would say, go right, they'd say, no, left, left, straight.
ah.
How is the leader
Focus on the voice.
of all the other crap that's going on, right? And focus, let people focus on that voice. And I think that's one of the keys. I think that's one of the cool things. So that's kind of the message I'm really trying to get out there, is that, as a leader, really need to step above all the noise. And when we
Nice.
do that, people can hear us, right? Don't
Yeah.
let the noise distract you, but let the noise, just be in the background, and let the voice guide you.
I love that, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And just as we wrap up here, coming back to some of these fledgling new advisors just about to leave the nest. Is there one piece of advice? Maybe 100, but one?
It takes a lot longer than you think.
Yeah.
People are going to leave the nest, and they're going to go, oh, I'm going to get, 6 clients right away and everything else. And you get pulled in a lot of directions. It just takes way longer. Try to Try to have 1 or 2 before you leave the nest would be my advice, just so that you're not in panic mode, and then just understand that it's when they're ready
Yeah.
sometimes. So you work them and you talk to them and a lot of times they're like, "Yeah, I really wanna do this," but then they go, "You know what? I'm just not quite ready yet." And so just keep that in mind and just keep going back. I've had 3 or 4 clients over the years where, it was almost a year later and they
Yeah.
called and said, "Okay, I'm ready." And all I did was every quarter, I would just ping them, just say, "Hey,
Yeah,
checking in."
exactly. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it's resilience. It's all the kind of things, from a sales perspective, I've been taught you don't need to kind of bang on the door every single day. Like that's just annoying. But check in, add value, be relevant. And, everyone's got their stuff going on, right? So
Yeah,
now might not be the time. So I totally agree. Hey, Jeff, look, thank you so much. Anyone who wants to learn more, there might be some people listening, Jeff. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'm sure there's plenty listening to yours, but hopefully we'll get to your level pretty soon. But pullthechute.net, right? Or
correct.
connect with Jeff on LinkedIn. And if you're a leader or a coach looking to build resilience, look, we can. Jeff's your man. What can I say? Thanks, Jeff.
Appreciate it, Colin. Really enjoyed the conversation.